What do a sunken battleship, a ghost of war, and a nuclear giant have in common? They vanished. Once towering symbols of American power, the USS Arizona, the USS Missouri, and the USS Enterprise ruled the seas. Why did these mighty warships disappear? What secrets do they still hold in their steel bones? It's a story about memory, honor, and the unstoppable march of history. Let's uncover what really happened to America's most legendary vessels.
The USS Arizona BB-39 never won a major naval battle. She didn't cross the Atlantic for war, she wasn't the fastest or the most modern. Yet today, she's the most visited warship in American history. Why? It all began in 1914. Built at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, the Arizona cost nearly $16 million, roughly $450 million in today's money. She was launched with great fanfare in 1915 and commissioned the following year, but the war she was built for, World War I, ended before she could see combat. Still, she became a proud symbol of U.S. strength, visiting ports from the Caribbean to Europe, training sailors and flying the flag high. At her launching ceremony, a crowd gathered to witness the moment, a rite of passage in naval tradition. But fate had a twist in store. Esther Ross, daughter of Arizona's then governor, stepped forward to christen the battleship. With the eyes of the nation upon her, she swung the ceremonial bottle of champagne. But it didn't break. In maritime lore, that's an ill omen. A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Some shrugged it off as superstition. Others would later recall that moment with a chill. Although the Arizona was part of the U.S. Navy for 25 years, she never fired a shot in anger before the fateful morning in 1941. She served mainly in training and ceremonial roles, carrying presidents, diplomats, and cadets, but destiny had something darker in store. Let's start with her sheer size. The Pennsylvania-class ships were significantly larger than their predecessors, the Nevada-class. At the time, she was a symbol of American naval power. 608 feet of steel muscle, armed with 12 14-inch guns, capable of launching shells the size of compact cars over 13 miles. Her armor was 13 inches thick, her heart beat with steam turbines, and she had one mission: show the world that America was a rising force. Let's be clear, the USS Arizona was not built for speed records. She was a battleship born for bruising. Still, her top speed of 21 knots, 24 miles per hour, was nothing to sneer at. For a vessel weighing over 30,000 tons, with armor thick enough to shrug off most artillery, hitting 21 knots was like watching a heavyweight boxer break into a sprint.
By the late 1920s, Arizona was showing its age. Technology had raced ahead, and the once mighty ship needed an upgrade. So between 1929 and 1931, she entered dry dock at the Norfolk Navy Yard for a dramatic transformation. New engines rumbled beneath her decks. Her anti-aircraft defenses were indeed upgraded. She emerged leaner, meaner, and tougher. A battleship reborn for a new age, just as storm clouds gathered over the Pacific. Before war edged her into tragedy, Arizona flirted with fame. In 1934, she made a grand appearance in the Warner Brothers film, Here Comes the Navy, starring Hollywood icons James Cagney, Pat O'Brien, and Gloria Stewart. For most Americans, it was their first real look at life aboard a battleship. Now here's a detail many overlook. The USS Arizona wasn't just a warship. In the 1930s, she also carried airplanes. That's right, she was equipped with Vought O2U Corsair scout planes, elegant biplanes with open cockpits and slender wings, launched not from a runway but from a catapult mounted on her deck. These weren't attack aircraft, but observation planes sent high into the sky to scout for enemy fleets, guide artillery fire, and provide intelligence long before radar made its mark. Tragically, the greatest danger came not from what she saw, but from what no one saw coming. She served as a proud member of the U.S. Pacific Fleet stationed at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. It was here, nestled in calm waters, that she lived her final peaceful days. Sailors polished her decks, officers strategized in her war rooms. No one knew that her resting place would soon become her tomb.
At exactly 8:10 a.m., a Japanese bomber dropped a 1,760-pound armor-piercing bomb that struck near the ship's number 2 turret. The bomb ignited over 1 million pounds of gunpowder stored below deck, triggering an explosion so massive it lifted the ship out of the water. In an instant, a fireball engulfed the forward section, sending flames and black smoke hundreds of feet into the sky, like a volcano erupting from beneath the sea. 1,177 of her 1,512 crewmen were killed instantly, many of them entombed below deck. It was the greatest loss of life on any U.S. warship in American history. Entire generations were changed. Sons, brothers, fathers, gone in a heartbeat. 23 sets of brothers died aboard the Arizona. One family lost 3 sons. Another, all of them. Eyewitnesses described the blast as something out of a nightmare. "The ship just disappeared," one sailor later recalled. Another said the air smelled like hot metal and death. Only about 334 survived. Think about that. Just 1 in 5 made it out alive, and most of them bore the scars for the rest of their lives. Some had to jump from the burning decks into oil-slicked water ablaze with flame. Others were trapped behind doors warped shut by heat. Rescue boats tried to reach the Arizona, but the inferno was too powerful. Can you imagine surviving something like that? The fires aboard the Arizona burned for over 2 days, fueled by oil and ammunition. Even after the flames died, smoke continued to rise from her shattered decks. Unlike most of the ships attacked that day, the USS Arizona was never raised. The damage was too catastrophic. Instead, the Navy decided she would remain where she sank, a solemn monument to the lost. Arizona's sister ship, the USS Pennsylvania, was also present at Pearl Harbor, but she survived and later fought throughout the Pacific. What makes the Arizona unlike any other ship lost in battle is this: it still holds the bodies of over 900 sailors and Marines. Their remains were never recovered. The Navy decided early on that distributing the wreckage would be both impractical and, more importantly, disrespectful. And among the most powerful symbols, survivors of the attack have chosen to be interred in the ship's wreck upon their passing, reunited with their crewmates in the place they never truly left. As of 2025, more than 40 survivors have had their ashes placed within the ship, their spirits forever tied to the ocean and steel. And yet, the ship herself still grieves. Even today, over 80 years later, she still leaks oil, about 2 to 9 quarts a day, from her ruptured hull. Locals and veterans call it the Black Tears of the Arizona. Some believe the ship is still mourning her crew, drop by drop. Some believe the oil will only stop when the last survivor dies. The last known crew member who survived the attack, Lou Conter, passed away in 2024 at age 102. Divers from the U.S. Navy still inspect the remains of the ship every few years. They go down into the dark, carefully examining the structural integrity of the wreck to ensure it isn't degrading in a way that might endanger the environment. After all, over 500,000 gallons of fuel were aboard when the Arizona sank. It's estimated that up to 500,000 gallons may still be entombed in her steel belly.
The tragedy of the Arizona led to sweeping changes in U.S. naval design, tactics, and intelligence. The lessons from Pearl Harbor reshaped American naval power, leading to aircraft carriers taking center stage instead of battleships. In a way, the Arizona's loss marked the birth of modern naval warfare. Though the ship sank, its memory refused to be buried. 2 decades later, in a different kind of spotlight, Elvis Presley helped bring new life in the memory of the Arizona. In 1961, the King of Rock and Roll staged a benefit concert at Pearl Harbor's Block Arena. His goal? Help fund the building of a permanent memorial over the shipwreck. Elvis and his team raised over $50,000, a staggering sum for the time. His performance not only brought national attention to the cause, but also kick-started a fundraising campaign that led to the construction of the USS Arizona Memorial, which opened in 1962. Designed by architect Alfred Price, who had been held in an internment camp during World War II, the USS Arizona Memorial doesn't touch the ship below. Visitors peer through cutouts in the floor to see the rusted hull below and read the names etched into the marble wall inside one by one. All 1,177 etched in stone, forever. Every year, over 1 million visitors come to Pearl Harbor, not just to learn history, but to feel it. Visitors often report a strange silence inside the memorial, despite the tourists and guides. Perhaps one of the most curious facts is this. Despite the devastation, the USS Arizona wasn't officially removed from the Navy's register until December 1942, a full year after she sank. Why the delay? Some say it was symbolic, others say it was bureaucratic, but many believe it was respect. Every December 7th, survivors return, children of the fallen gather, and taps echoes over the harbor. Many weep, some salute, all remember.
Many myths swirl around the Arizona, some romantic, some false. A popular one claims that a sailor who had just survived another shipwreck had been reassigned to the Arizona, only to die days later. Another rumor was that Japan had intentionally targeted the Arizona first. In reality, while the Arizona was certainly a prize target, there's no confirmed evidence that she was uniquely singled out. The Japanese pilots were following a broader strategy to cripple the US Pacific Fleet. Arizona's fate was a tragic chance. In a powerful tribute to the past, the US Navy announced in the 2020s that a new nuclear-powered submarine will bear the name USS Arizona. The first time since the attack on Pearl Harbor that this legendary name will sail again. As one Arizona prepares to rise again, another lies beneath the waves, guarded by the battleship that brought peace. The USS Missouri is permanently berthed at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, near the USS Arizona Memorial, symbolically marking the beginning and end of America's World War II involvement. The Missouri is deliberately moored facing the USS Arizona, so that the spirits of those lost in 1941 can watch over her. The USS Missouri, BB-63, affectionately nicknamed Mighty Mo, is a title she earned for her immense size, strength, and symbolic role in ending World War II. The Missouri bears the proud name of America's 24th state, continuing the Navy's tradition of naming battleships after states. The USS Missouri was constructed at the Brooklyn Navy Yard and launched on January 29, 1944, just 28 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. From keel to launch, she was built in just 3 years, an astonishing feat even by today's standards. Her construction cost around $100 million, a staggering amount back then. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $1.9 billion in today's dollars. Just imagine the cost of an entire fleet's worth of Ferraris poured into one hulking steel-plated behemoth capable of throwing 16-inch shells over 20 miles. The USS Missouri was the last battleship ever built by the United States. She was an Iowa-class Colossus, designed for speed, strength, and sea dominance. Stretching 887 feet long, about the size of 3 football fields, she weighed over 58,000 tons when fully loaded. And she could move up to 33 knots or 38 miles per hour, thanks to her powerful engines. Her main armor belt was 12.1 inches thick, enough to withstand massive shell fire and torpedo hits. Why build another battleship in the age of airplanes? Because America wanted a fast, mobile fortress. The Iowa class was the answer. The Missouri was the longest battleship ever built by the US and could outrun destroyers. She was built for presence and carried 9 16-inch 50-caliber Mark 7 guns, each capable of launching a 2,700-pound shell more than 23 miles. Surrounding those were dozens of 5-inch 40mm and 20mm anti-aircraft guns. With a crew of over 2,700 sailors, the Missouri functioned like a small floating city, complete with a post office, dentist, barbers, and even a bakery. But she didn't exist to sit in a harbor. She was destined to etch her name in history.
By January 1945, the Missouri joined the Pacific Fleet, assigned to Admiral William Bull Halsey's ferocious Third Fleet. The timing couldn't have been more critical. The war in the Pacific was reaching a fever pitch, and Japan wasn't backing down. Missouri sailed straight into the inferno, supporting Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and the massive air raids on mainland Japan. Her guns hammered enemy positions, and her presence alone turned the tides of morale. But the fiercest battles were still to come. On April 11, 1945, a Japanese kamikaze pilot hurled his plane into the starboard side of the USS Missouri, but the battleship's thick armor held firm. Though scorched and dented, she suffered no serious damage, and not a single crew member was killed or severely injured. The crew recovered the pilot's body with dignity and held a full military burial at sea, complete with white cloth, salutes, and prayers. In the heart of war, aboard a ship forged for battle, this act of respect became one of the Missouri's most powerful and human legacies. But Missouri's role in history wasn't finished. Just a month later, with the smoke of war still drifting across the Pacific, she would find herself at the center of the world's gaze.
September 2nd, 1945, Tokyo Bay. The formal surrender of the Empire of Japan. The deck of the USS Missouri became a global stage. General Douglas MacArthur, standing like a statue in his open khaki shirt, uttered the words that would echo for decades. "It is my earnest hope, indeed the hope of all mankind, that from this solemn occasion a better world shall emerge." Representatives from 9 allied nations stood side by side as Japanese Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu signed the instrument of surrender with a cane in hand, the result of an assassination attempt years earlier. Surrounding Missouri were over 250 Allied warships, arrayed like silent sentinels of freedom. The sea had never seen such a show of might. Cameras clicked, history froze. The war that had consumed the world for 6 years ended right there, on her teakwood deck. And just like that, World War II was over. The war that swallowed continents, shaken empires, and claimed tens of millions of lives ended on the deck of the USS Missouri. Ever wonder why this particular ship was chosen for the surrender? Some say it was politics, others symbolism. The Missouri carried a powerful connection to the U.S. heartland through President Harry S. Truman, who hailed from that very state. But beyond politics or coincidence, the Missouri embodied America's rebirth, modern, massive, and unstoppable. She stood as living proof of how far the U.S. Navy had come since Pearl Harbor, from burning chaos to triumphant command of the seas. But peace doesn't last forever, and Missouri wasn't built for retirement. When the Korean War erupted in 1950, Mighty Mo was called back into action. She bombarded the North Korean coast. Supporting United Nations troops, her massive 16-inch guns thundered like distant gods. The ship's presence alone sent a clear message: the old warhorse still had teeth. But by 1955, the age of battleships was fading. Aircraft carriers had taken center stage. Missiles and jet fighters now ruled the seas. In 1955, the Missouri was decommissioned and sent to rest at Bremerton, Washington. You might think her story ends there, but Mighty Mo doesn't do quiet endings. In 1984, under President Ronald Reagan's 600-ship Navy initiative, Missouri was brought back to life. She was modernized with Tomahawk cruise missiles, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, and Phalanx CIWS close-in weapon systems. Imagine a World War II Titan reborn with Cold War teeth. The old dreadnought became a hybrid, part steel dinosaur, part space-age predator. She returned to service and took part in Operation Desert Storm in 1991, launching 28 Tomahawk missiles into Iraq. One of the last battleships on Earth had returned to war, more than 45 years after her debut. It's a fact that boggles the mind and bends the timeline. How many war machines get to end one war and fight another that began in a radically different age? Equipped with satellite-guided weaponry and crewed by sailors young enough to be the grandchildren of those on board in '45, Missouri proved that history doesn't just sleep in museums, sometimes it fires back.
The collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s and the absence of a perceived threat to the United States led to drastic cuts in the defense budget. The high cost of maintaining and operating battleships as part of the United States Navy's active fleet became uneconomical. As a result, Missouri was decommissioned on 31st of March 1992 at Long Beach for the final time. Her guns fell silent, but her legend had only grown. She was struck from the Naval Vessel Register in 1995, but not forgotten. Missouri's fame doesn't stop at history books. She's a bona fide Hollywood legend, too. Steven Seagal's action-packed thriller Under Siege, 1992, takes place almost entirely on her decks, and in Battleship 2012, the ship gets a wild sci-fi revival, helping to fight off an alien invasion. A rumor has it that some of her actual crew members were extras in Under Siege, which might explain the film's unusual realistic engine room shots.
Today, USS Missouri is a museum ship moored at Pearl Harbor, just a stone's throw from the wreck of the USS Arizona. At first, not everyone was thrilled about moving the USS Missouri to Pearl Harbor. Some folks at the National Park Service were worried it might steal the spotlight from the USS Arizona. After all, Arizona's tragic sinking during the attack on Pearl Harbor is one of the most powerful symbols of that day, while Missouri is best known as the site where World War II officially ended. To avoid sending the wrong message, they came up with a thoughtful solution. Missouri was positioned farther back and turned so that people attending ceremonies on her deck wouldn't be facing the Arizona Memorial directly. Instead, they chose to have Missouri's bow point toward the memorial, a great gesture to show that she's standing guard, watching over the Arizona. Every year, veterans who served aboard the USS Missouri return to her decks, now moored in Pearl Harbor as a museum and memorial. Some smile, some cry, some bring grandchildren and speak softly of battles past. And on those sacred wooden boards lies a brass plaque, marking the exact spot where Japan formally surrendered on September 2, 1945. The war ended there. Step aboard the Missouri now, and it's like walking through a time machine. You can stand in the very room where Japan surrendered, faithfully recreated down to the maps, the chairs, even the signatures on the documents. Radar stations, chunky black telephones, plotting tables with grease pencil marks, all preserved. They say the USS Missouri was almost scrapped in the 1990s, but people weren't ready to say goodbye. Thanks to a wave of public support, she was saved and turned into a museum instead. After all, you don't just toss aside the ship where World War II officially ended.
Missouri marked the end of one world war, but a new kind of war was brewing, and it needed a very different type of ship. A ship with 8 nuclear reactors humming beneath its decks, capable of circling the globe without refueling. This was the USS Enterprise CVN-65, affectionately nicknamed the Big E, a floating city, a steel giant, and a legend of modern naval history.
The USS Enterprise wasn't the first ship to bear that storied name. In fact, she was the 8th, a tribute to a long naval lineage that began during the American Revolutionary War and was carried on by a World War II-era aircraft carrier, CV-6, one of the most decorated ships of that time. But CVN-65 was different. Commissioned on November 25, 1961, Enterprise was the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in the world. Built at Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia, her construction cost the U.S. government a jaw-dropping $451.3 million, equivalent to over $5 billion today. But the result? A warship unlike anything the world had ever seen. USS Enterprise was intended as the lead ship of a new class of 6 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, but massive increases in construction costs led to the remaining vessels being canceled. Measuring 1,123 feet long, longer than the Titanic by over 250 feet, the Enterprise was for decades the longest naval vessel ever built. She looked more like a floating airbase than a ship, boasting 4 steam catapults, 4 elevators, and a flight deck the size of 4.5 acres. She could launch fighter jets, bombers, surveillance planes, and even helicopters all simultaneously. Her 4 catapults could launch planes every 25 seconds like clockwork. And then there were the reactors. While most nuclear carriers today operate with 2, the Enterprise had 8 Westinghouse A2W reactors, one for each of her propeller shafts. Why 8? It was the Navy's first experiment with nuclear carrier propulsion, and redundancy was the name of the game. These reactors gave her the endurance of Poseidon himself. She didn't need to refuel for over 2 decades at a time. That meant power. That meant endurance. Her fuel lasted 20 years between refuelings. Let that sink in. 2 decades of non-stop potential without stopping to gas up. You could always tell it was the Enterprise by the way she looked. Her silhouette was unlike any other carrier in the fleet, thanks to the massive radar dome rising above her flight deck. Nicknamed the Beehive, the dome gave her an almost sci-fi vibe. The Beehive housed the revolutionary radar and communication suite, a nerve center that let Enterprise coordinate air missions, detect incoming threats, and maintain her role as a sovereign island of power, even in the most remote corners of the sea. It made her an icon, a visual exclamation mark in every photograph. You couldn't mistake her for anyone else. But being iconic doesn't mean being perfect. Yes, she had flaws. Some criticized her 8-reactor design as overly complex and expensive, a lesson later corrected with just 2 reactors in Nimitz-class carriers. Others questioned her costs and maintenance burdens, but even her critics couldn't deny she changed the game. Her true scale wasn't just in megawatts or steel. When Enterprise went to sea, she carried a crew of about 4,600 men and women. That's a floating city, with its own fire department, hospital, post office, jail, radio station, barbershop, and more. Sailors aboard often joked that you could get lost on the Enterprise and still never leave the ship. The complexity of her passageways rivaled a small town's street grid. And just like any great city, this one moved, with breathtaking speed. Ask a Navy veteran about the Enterprise's top speed and you'll likely get a smile and a shrug. Her exact speed remains classified, cloaked in mystery like the ship herself. But we know this: she could fly across the ocean at over 33 knots, about 38 miles per hour, making her one of the fastest carriers ever built. For a ship displacing over 90,000 tons, that's not just fast, it's astonishing.
Her power was unmatched. The Enterprise didn't wait long to see real action. In October 1962, barely a year after her commissioning, the Big E was thrust into the high-stakes naval confrontation of the 20th century, the Cuban Missile Crisis. As the world held its breath, she took her position in the Atlantic, part of President Kennedy's quarantine line to stop Soviet ships from delivering nuclear missiles to Cuba. In 1964, just 3 years into her service, USS Enterprise joined 2 fellow nuclear-powered ships, the cruiser USS Long Beach and the frigate USS Bainbridge, on a historic voyage called Operation Sea Orbit. Together, they formed Task Force One and accomplished what no other surface fleet had ever done before. They circumnavigated the globe without refueling once. From 1965 to 1975, the Enterprise became a relentless force in the Vietnam War. She launched thousands of combat sorties against North Vietnamese targets, often staying on station longer than any other ship could, thanks to her nuclear heart. Her fight deck echoed with the thunder of Phantoms and Skyhawks, her hangars bustling with mechanics, adrenaline, and the hum of war.
Did you know the Enterprise helped test the F-14 Tomcat, the same iconic jet flown by Maverick and Top Gun? Even more impressive, during the Cold War, she carried nuclear-capable aircraft. At any moment, she was able to unleash atomic firepower from the sky. One particularly striking moment came in 1969, when Apollo 11 returned from the moon. Enterprise stood by in the Pacific as part of the Recovery Task Force. Though she didn't pick up the astronauts herself, that was USS Hornet's honor, her presence was symbolic. a futuristic ship welcoming home a spacecraft. In the same year, humans walked on the moon, and a nuclear ship launched jets at sea. Two frontiers, 1 year, one message. We're not just dominating the oceans, we're claiming the stars. And every great warrior has battle scars. Enterprise was no exception. On January 14, 1969, a tragic accident struck. While off the coast of Hawaii, a Zuni rocket accidentally discharged on the flight deck, setting off a chain reaction of explosions and fires. 27 men were killed, over 300 were injured, 15 aircraft were destroyed, and another 17 were damaged. But the crew fought with the kind of grit that legends are made of. They extinguished the fires in just over 4 hours, and the Enterprise returned to port under her own power. The Navy learned hard lessons that day. Firefighting protocols were changed, safety systems were upgraded, and Enterprise, like a phoenix, sailed on. Smoke once again filled the skies, this time not from rockets on a flight deck, but from two towers in Manhattan. When the dust settled over Ground Zero in September 2001, America looked to the sea for answers. And steaming through the Arabian Sea came the USS Enterprise. She wasn't the newest carrier, far from it, but she was ready. Within days, her flight deck was a hive of fury, launching the very first airstrikes of Operation Enduring Freedom. Taliban camps blinked out like candles in a sandstorm, and the Big E, as sailors lovingly called her, was once again at the razor's edge of history. That moment alone could have written her into the record books. 2 years later, in 2003, this 40-year-old giant roared back into action during Operation Iraqi Freedom. She wasn't just keeping up, she was setting the pace. It was like watching a heavyweight champion from the 1960s enter the ring in the 2000s and still win on sheer grit and engineering. After over 50 years of service, USS Enterprise was officially decommissioned on February 3, 2017. The process wasn't simple. Decommissioning a nuclear-powered vessel is a logistical and environmental challenge. Her 8 nuclear reactors had to be safely defueled and dismantled, a process that continues even today, with her hull awaiting final disposal in Newport News. The process is anticipated to take 5 years, with Enterprise to be entirely gone by 2030. The total costs of scrapping Enterprise have been estimated at over $1 billion. But her spirit is still alive. A new USS Enterprise CVN-80 is being built, a Ford-class supercarrier, continuing the name and legacy. When CVN-80 enters service, estimated in the 2030s, she'll carry forward that torch. Question for you. If the Enterprise were made into a museum ship like the USS Intrepid, would you visit? Should the Navy honor her by displaying her island's superstructure permanently? Waiting for you in the comments.
3 ships, 3 eras, 1 legacy that refused to rust. The Arizona whispers of sacrifice. The Missouri stands tall in victory. The Enterprise roars into the future with nuclear fire and courage. Have you ever stood on the deck of one of these legends and felt the hum of history beneath your feet? If not, add it to your list. Before you sail away, explore our next videos. Discover the secrets of the ships, monuments, and legends that shaped our world. Ready to dive deeper into history's hidden oceans?